Welcome to our discussion of vegetarianism in the Torah. We have a contradiction found in this parsha, Parshat Re'eh, versus a story earlier on in the Torah. In Parshat Re'eh, gives the impression that the Torah is not only permitting the consumption of meat, but the Torah gives full license to eat as much meat as we'd ever like to have. It says, when God will expand your boundaries, and you will say, Ochla basar, I'd like to eat some meat. Ki taveh nafshecha lechol basar, b'chol avad nafshecha tochol basar. If your heart should desire to eat meat, to your heart's desire, you shall eat meat. It seems a carte blanche, permission, even an encouragement, to eat as much meat as we'd like. However, we have another story. The story in the story of Kivrot HaTava, the place where the Jews went down to their graves because of that great desire that they had. A story in Parshat B'halotcha, a story in the book of Numbers, in Bamidbar. There, the Jews are smitten, Habasaro odenu ben shinehem, while the flesh is still between their teeth. Af Hashem chara ba'am, and the wrath of God came out against the Jewish people, and they were smitten for this great desire that they had for meat. Which one is it? Are we permitted to indulge in meat? Is it a carte blanche to just enjoy as much meat as we'd like? Or is the very desire for meat somehow overly physical, overly indulgent, and somehow a sin against God? Rashi here, based on the Gemara in Chulin and in Tosefta in 4th parak of Erchin, resolves this contradiction. Rashi says that it's only ki yarchiv Hashem lokecha et gvulcha, when you have great expanse, when the borders of Israel are the most expansive they'll ever be, when you have great wealth and great largesse, then you can have meat. As Rashi says, limdat Torah derech eretz. The Torah teaches us a way of life, a proper measure of character. Shelo yitaveh adam lechol basar. You should not even desire to eat meat. Ela mitoch rachvat yadayim v'osher. Only if you have great largesse, great wealth, then, and only then, can you begin to have meat. In the desert, however, where the Jews had very little, it wasn't appropriate to ask for so much meat. This is based on a Gemara here in Chulin Daf Pei Daled, 84, where he says that, look, if you have a lot of money, then you should have meat more often. If you have less money, kigon anu, maybe just once a week. Ideally, if you're very poor, you shouldn't have meat. But kigon anu, we who cannot control our desires, we even borrow to have meat for ourselves. That's one version of the story. A perhaps slightly more radical version is found in the Chizkuni. Chizkuni, also a French commentator like Rashi, a little later on, and he says, "Mikan shlo yadam lokeach litra basar elken nimlach tchila." You have to say, "Va'amarta ochla basar." You have to say, "You know what? I think I'd like to have meat." You have to consult with your family, and you have to say, "You know what? I think I'll have some meat." According to the Chizkuni, if you want to have meat, you have to consult with your family. You have to decide if your budget allows for this type of meat. You need to think about it before you go ahead and have meat. And the most radical formulation is in one of the predecessors of the Chizkuni, Rabbi Yosef Bechor Shor, one of the members of the Tosfot school, and he quotes the Gemara in the following fashion. It says as follows. Amar Rabbi Elazar ben Shamua, Rabbi Elazar ben Shamua says, Lo yidlikach adam basar, no one should take meat, ad sheyehei kemelech beveito. You shouldn't take meat until you're like a king in your house. If you're not wealthy, you shouldn't have meat. What the Torah is telling us is that if we want to have meat, we need to consider several factors. Number one, have you consulted with your family? Have you thought about it? Is it just a thoughtless act? Or have you considered what it means for your health and for your wealth? Number two, what will this mean for your budget? Very important not to overindulge and waste money. And number three, it encourages moderation. Absolute moderation. In fact, the Torah speaks here of hunting for meat. That when you want to eat meat, you can eat meat the same way you might have a tzvi and an ayal. The same way you might have a deer. Now, how would you get a deer? Well, you go out and hunt. Some days the hunt is very successful. On other days, you fail. And as a result, some days you eat meat and some days you don't. You don't eat meat every day. This too is a lesson in moderation. The Kli Yakar, Rabbi Lunshitz, points out a very fascinating idea. That when Yitzchak Avinu, our forefather Isaac, went ahead and told his son Esav, go out and hunt me some meat. Why did he do it? Why did he ask him to hunt for meat? Why didn't he ask to bring from the flock of Jacob to bring some meat? Why waste all that time? What he was telling him was, my son Esav, practice moderation. Go out and have some meat, but have only once in a while. When you have a successful hunt, maybe today you will, maybe tomorrow, only once in a while should we have meat. In this day of caring about our health and the notion of not consuming too much fat, it's an important lesson. And when it comes to eating meat, should be indeed with moderation. One suggestion in the Talmud is, Me'erev Shabbos le'erev Shabbos. From Shabbos to Shabbos. It's a good thing to have meat on Shabbos, especially on Yontif. It's a mitzvah to have meat. But during the week, not necessary to have it all the time. We don't need to be running constantly to have meat. This is kivod hatava. That would be overly desirous. It's also important to moderate our budget, to live in moderation. This is one of the great lessons of our parsha. Does the Torah believe in vegetarianism? I don't believe so. But the notion of limiting our consumption of meat, absolutely. The overindulgence can be kivod hatava, can be our very graves. Thank you for joining us today, the Anshe Sfar Beth Lemeth congregation. I want to thank Jason Lefkowitz for making today's presentation possible. If you'd like to email me, I'm at rabbijmf@gmail.com. Thank you.